Zeus didn't win the throne because he was the strongest. He won it because his mother committed the most dangerous act in the ancient world. She lied to a god. Not just any god. She lied to the most powerful being alive. Her own husband, the ruler of the universe. Cronus, the god who had already swallowed 5 of his children whole to prevent exactly this from happening. Here's what nobody tells you about this story. This wasn't mythology. This was a coup. Phase 1. Survive the prophecy. Phase 2. Build a rebel alliance from scratch. Phase 3. Wage a 10-year war against literal titans. And then, Phase 4. Purge every single threat once you win. The story of how Zeus took the throne is the oldest political playbook ever written. And when you see the real version, not the watered-down textbook version, you will not believe how clean his execution was. Stay with me. Before Zeus was born, his father Cronus already knew. He knew because it had happened to him. And this is the part of Greek mythology that most people skip right over, and it is the part that makes everything else make sense. Because Cronus didn't inherit the throne, he stole it. Let's go back further than most mythology videos bother to go. In the beginning, there was Uranus, the sky, and Gaia, the earth. They were the first parents, the first divine couple, the original rulers of everything that existed. And they had children, lots of children. The Titans, 12 of them. Then the Cyclopes, 3 one-eyed giants of terrifying creative power. Then the Hecatoncheires, 3 giants with 50 heads and 100 hands each. And Uranus, the father, hated some of his children, not all of them, just the ones who frightened him, the Cyclopes, the Hecatoncheires. He found them monstrous, disturbing, threatening in ways he couldn't fully articulate but felt deep in whatever serves as a god's gut. So he pushed them back into Gaia's womb, back into the earth. He refused to let them exist freely in the world he ruled. Gaia was furious. The pain of carrying children inside her indefinitely, the sheer physical weight of suppression, made her desperate. So she made a sickle, not a simple tool, a weapon of grey adamantine, hard as the bones of the universe itself. And she went to her Titan children with a proposition. Who will help me? 11 of the 12 Titans refused. One didn't. Cronus raised his hand, the youngest of the Titans, the boldest, and possibly the most calculating. Because Cronus wasn't just doing this out of loyalty to his mother, he was doing this because he understood that removing Uranus meant he could take the throne himself. Gaia gave Cronus the sickle. She told him where and when, and Cronus waited. When Uranus descended to embrace the earth, in the moment when the sky god was most exposed, Cronus struck. He castrated his own father with the adamantine sickle. The blood of Uranus fell into the sea and became several things simultaneously. The Furies, ancient goddesses of vengeance, sprang from his blood where it hit the earth. The giants emerged, and from the sea foam where his severed flesh fell, Aphrodite, goddess of love, rose fully formed. The god of love was born from an act of violence. The Greeks were not subtle people. And Uranus, falling, only wounded, dethroned, humiliated, whispered a curse as he retreated into the sky. Your own children will do to you exactly what you did to me. A prophecy. Cronus heard it. And unlike his father, who had suppressed his children physically, Cronus chose a different method. He swallowed them. Cronus married his sister, Rhea. Rhea was beautiful, powerful, and devoted. She gave birth to the first generation of Olympian gods, and every single time, every single birth, Cronus was waiting. The first child was Hestia, goddess of the hearth, goddess of home and family and sacred fire. The moment she was born, Cronus swallowed her. The second was Demeter, goddess of the harvest, the deity responsible for every grain, every crop, every meal. Swallowed. The third was Hera, who would one day become queen of the gods, who would become synonymous with marriage and jealousy and power. Swallowed whole by her father before she ever took a single breath of free air. Then Hades, lord of the dead, ruler of the underworld, a being of such gravity that even other gods feared to speak his name. Swallowed. Then Poseidon, god of the sea, earthquakes and horses, wielder of forces that could shake the foundations of the earth. Swallowed. 5 children, 5 gods of incomprehensible power. all living inside the stomach of their father, alive, conscious, experiencing divine time in total darkness. Think about what that means for a second. These aren't humans with human consciousness. These are gods, immortal, unchanging, aware. They weren't sleeping inside Cronus. They were awake. Every day, every year, every decade they spent in there, fully conscious, fully alive, trapped. Now Rhea had watched this happen 5 times, 5 pregnancies, 5 births, 5 children presented to her husband, and 5 children disappeared down his throat. Each time she held them for that one moment, long enough to see their faces, long enough for the bond to form, and then gone. By the time the 6th pregnancy came, Rhea had made a decision. This one was different. She went to her own parents, Gaia and Uranus, the same Uranus her husband had mutilated, the same Earth Mother whose suffering had started all of this. She told them what had happened, all of it, and they gave her a plan. When the 6th child was born, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth, the exact size of a newborn infant, bundled exactly as a baby would be bundled, warm, shaped, convincing. She presented it to Cronus, as she had presented all the others, and Cronus, the most powerful god in existence, swallowed the stone without even looking. That is what absolute power does to a mind. When you have never been challenged, when every being in existence has submitted to you without question, when your word has been law since before history began, you stop verifying. You assume. Cronus assumed because he always had been obeyed. He assumed because no one had ever dared deceive him. He assumed because he was Cronus, and Cronus did not get fooled by his wife. Except this time, he did. The real child, the 6th, the hidden one, was smuggled to Crete, hidden in a cave on Mount Ida, fed by a divine goat named Amalthea, a goat whose milk was so potent it could sustain a god, whose horn, later broken off, would become the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, overflowing forever. And guarding the cave, the curettes, warriors, armed, dancing in formation around the cave entrance, and whenever the infant cried, they clashed their weapons. Together, bronze shields against bronze spears, the noise of battle covering the sound of a baby. So Cronus, 3 mountains away, would hear only thunder. That is the beginning of Zeus. Not power, not divinity, celebrated, a crying child, hidden in a mountain cave while armed men made noise to cover his existence. And the child, who grew up invisible to the most powerful being in the world, learned the first rule of seizing power. Stay hidden until the moment is right. Growing up in a cave teaches you things that a palace never could. It teaches you patience. It teaches you that your enemy doesn't know you exist. It teaches you that your only advantage is information they don't have. It teaches you that the moment you reveal yourself, the clock starts, and you better be ready when it does. Zeus was raised in secrecy until he reached divine maturity. And when that moment came, he didn't charge at his father. He didn't announce himself. He didn't raise an army immediately. He infiltrated. Zeus needed an agent inside his father's household, someone with direct access to Cronus, someone Cronus trusted, someone who could introduce something into his cup. This required careful selection. The wrong choice meant exposure. Exposure meant death. And if Zeus died before he freed his siblings, everything ended. He found her. Her name was Metis, Titaness of wisdom and cunning. The most intelligent being in creation, the one being who could think circles around a king who had stopped thinking. Zeus came to Metis with a proposition. She would become Cronus's cupbearer. She would serve him, attend him, be trusted by him. And at the right moment, she would add something to his drink. The ancient sources vary on exactly what it was. Some say an emetic herb prepared by Gaia herself. Some say a mustard mixture. Some say a potion of divine complexity. What every source agrees on is what it did. It made Cronus violently, catastrophically ill. And when Cronus purged, the stone came out first. The stone he had swallowed instead of Zeus decades earlier, still intact, as indestructible as the day it went down. And then Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, one by one, fully formed, fully divine, furious, 5 gods freed from the stomach of their father all at once, all looking at each other for the first time, and standing in front of them, the younger sibling they had never met, telling them it was time for war. Imagine that moment from Hades' perspective. You were swallowed as an infant. You spent an unmeasurable length of divine time in total darkness. You couldn't die because you're a god. You couldn't leave because you were physically trapped. You had no light, no sensation, no company, just existence, just awareness, just the endless nothing of your father's stomach. And then, without warning, you are expelled into blinding light, and the first thing you see is your brothers and sisters. And the second thing you see is this young god standing in front of you saying, "I freed you, follow me." The 5 older siblings followed him. Of course they did. He was the only one who had acted. 6 gods, against a generation of titans who had been ruling for eons. Zeus understood the math wasn't in his favor. He needed more. And here is where he demonstrated something that would define his entire reign. The ability to see who your enemy has made into enemies. Buried in Tartarus, the lowest, most wretched pit of the underworld, Cronus had imprisoned the beings his own father had feared most. The Cyclopes, 3 one-eyed giants, children of Uranus, imprisoned their entire lives because the gods who came before found their potential terrifying. And the Hecatoncheires, 3 giants of impossibly vast scale, 50 heads each, 100 hands each, beings so powerful that every god who had ever held the throne had decided these things must stay locked away forever. Zeus went to Tartarus. Personally, he descended into the worst place in existence. He found the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires. He broke their chains, and he made them a promise. If they helped him win this war, they would never be imprisoned again. That promise would matter. Remember it. Because how Zeus handled that promise after the war tells you more about who he was than anything that happened during the fighting. The Cyclopes, freed, were grateful, and gratitude from divine craftsmen looks like weapons. They gave Zeus the thunderbolt, not a metaphor for power, not a symbol of authority, a physical weapon of divine force, forged in darkness by beings who had been perfecting their craft in absolute imprisonment for as long as time had existed. To Poseidon, they gave the trident, 3-pronged, divine, capable of splitting the earth and churning the seas. To Hades, they gave something different, a helm, the helm of invisibility, the ability to move unseen through any realm, to be present without being perceived, to watch without being watched. 3 weapons, 3 brothers, 3 domains of power. This wasn't random generosity. This was Zeus distributing instruments of war in a way that maximized each brother's contribution while keeping the most powerful weapon for himself. The thunderbolt was ranged. It could strike from any distance. It could hit any target. It was the supreme weapon, and Zeus kept it. So now the forces were assembled. 6 Olympian gods, freed and furious. The Cyclopes, master craftsmen and powerful in their own right. The Hecatoncheires, beings capable of hurling 300 boulders simultaneously. Against them, the Titans, led by Cronus, ancient, powerful, experienced, led militarily by Atlas, the Titan general, arguably the most formidable fighter in existence. And it was not going to be a short war. What happened next has a name. The Titanomachy, the war between Olympians and Titans. And the ancient poets who described it were not writing small. Hesiod, the closest thing to a primary source we have on this conflict, and described the physical scale in terms that should make you stop and recalibrate what you're picturing. The seas boiled, the earth shook so violently that Tartarus itself trembled, and Tartarus is at the bottom of everything. Zeus fired thunderbolts continuously, not one at a time, continuously, until the lightning came so thick and fast that the sky was a solid wall of fire. The heat was so extreme that the ocean began to burn. Not metaphorically. The ocean burned. This is not a story about 2 armies in a field. This is a war fought across the entire structure of reality. Heaven, earth, sea, the underworld. Every dimension of existence became a battlefield. For 10 years. 10 years. For context, the Trojan War, the most famous military conflict in Greek mythology, lasted 10 years and destroyed one of the greatest cities in the ancient world. The Titanomachy lasted 10 years and nearly destroyed the structure of reality itself. The Titans were not simply overmatched. Some of them chose neutrality. Prometheus, the Titan of forethought, used his prophetic gift to see that Zeus would win. He switched sides before the battle even started, but most of the Titans fought. And Atlas, their general, was a tactician of divine ability. For 9 years, the war was essentially a draw. 9 years of continuous conflict, 9 years of the sky on fire, 9 years of the earth shaking. Neither side could achieve a decisive advantage. The Titans had time, experience, and the weight of an entire age of divine rule behind them. Zeus had weapons, freed allies, and something the Titans didn't: a willingness to do whatever was necessary. The breakthrough came from intelligence, specifically from Gaia. Earth herself told Zeus what the Titans had discovered centuries earlier, that the Hecatoncheires were the key. Not the Cyclopes, not the Thunderbolt, not even Zeus's own power, the 100-handed giants. Zeus descended back into Tartarus. He freed the Hecatoncheires, again, personally, and he renewed the promise he had made before the war started. He fed them nectar and ambrosia, the food of gods. He spoke to them as equals. He made them feel what they had never felt before, valued, and then he led them back to the surface. What the Hecatoncheires could do in battle defies easy visualization. Each one had 100 hands. Each hand could hurl a boulder, 3 of them attacking simultaneously. That's 300 boulders all at once, not hurled randomly, targeted, coordinated, accompanied by Zeus's continuous thunderbolt fire and Poseidon's earthquake trident. The Titans, who had held their ground for 9 years, broke in a single engagement. They didn't retreat in good order, they fled. Zeus didn't kill the Titans, that's important. He imprisoned them. In Tartarus, the same prison where the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires had been held. Locked in, sealed, guarded, and the Hecatoncheires were assigned as the wardens. The beings who had spent their entire existence as prisoners were now the ones holding the keys. Zeus understood symbolism, but for Atlas, the general, the military mind, the one most responsible for 9 years of successful Titan resistance, Zeus had something else planned. Not Tartarus. Tartarus was for enemies. Atlas had earned a different punishment. He was condemned to stand at the western edge of the earth and hold the sky on his shoulders. Not for a term, not until he demonstrated remorse, not until some condition was met. Forever. That is not a punishment. That is a message. The message: this is what leading the opposition costs. This is what happens to the best military mind who serves the wrong side. Not death, not imprisonment with your peers. Something unique, something visible, something endless, something every god for all of eternity would see and understand the meaning of. The war is over. The Titans are imprisoned. The threat is neutralized. And now comes the phase that most mythology courses skip entirely. The consolidation. Zeus and his 2 brothers had to divide up what they'd won. The method they agreed on, or claimed to agree on, was a lottery. 3 brothers, 3 domains, draw by lot. Zeus drew the sky and the heavens. Poseidon drew the sea. Hades drew the underworld. Was it really a lottery? The youngest brother, the one who organized the entire rebellion, the one who held the thunderbolt, conveniently drew the most prestigious domain, the sky, where the gods live, where Olympus sits, where authority flows from. Maybe the draw was fair, maybe it wasn't, but no one was in a position to challenge it. Which was rather the point. Zeus's first political move after the division was to lock down his position through marriage, but this is complicated, and it's worth going into properly, because it reveals a great deal about how Zeus operated. His first marriage, or his most politically significant early relationship, was with Metis, the same Titaness who had helped him poison his father, his first ally, his first instrument, the most intelligent being in creation. He married her. And then the prophecy came, a prophecy from Gaia and Uranus. Metis would first bear a daughter, then she would bear a son, and that son would be more powerful than Zeus himself. The same template, the same mechanism, the same threat that had destroyed Uranus, the same threat that had made Cronus swallow 5 children. And Zeus's response? He swallowed Metis, whole, his ally, his wife, the woman who had made his victory possible, pregnant with his child. swallowed. Let that land. Because what Zeus just did was not a break from the pattern of Cronus. It was a continuation of it. The same fear, the same calculation, the same outcome. The only difference was that Zeus was more efficient. Cronus swallowed children after they were born. Zeus swallowed his wife before the dangerous child could even arrive. He eliminated the threat at conception. He made the pattern invisible by burying it inside himself. But Metis didn't stop working. Inside Zeus, she kept crafting. Ancient sources say she forged armor and a helmet for the child she carried. Divine metalwork inside the body of the god who had swallowed her. The hammering gave Zeus headaches, not ordinary headaches, divine, skull-splitting, unbearable headaches, the kind that made the king of the gods genuinely incapacitated. The only remedy came from Hephaestus, the lame god of the forge, who took an axe, or in some versions a hammer, and split Zeus's skull open, and from the crack in the king's skull burst Athena, fully grown, fully armored, in full battle dress, already carrying her spear. The goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, born from the brain of the god who had swallowed her mother. The Greeks embedded a great deal of meaning into this image. Wisdom, specifically the strategic kind, is born from the head, not the body. It cannot be suppressed by fear. It emerges on its own terms, sometimes through violence, sometimes through pain. And Athena, daughter of the imprisoned Metis, became one of Zeus's most trusted and powerful children. The thing he tried to prevent became one of his greatest assets. But there were other marriages, other relationships, other political arrangements. The one that matters most is Hera. Zeus pursued Hera with the full weight of divine persistence. And when she refused him initially, he transformed himself into a small, injured bird, a cuckoo. He appeared in front of her while she sat outside, wounded, cold, shivering, and Hera, moved by compassion, tucked the bird against her chest to warm it. At which point Zeus transformed back. That is how the king of the gods won his queen. Not through direct approach, not through an honest declaration, through a calculated display of vulnerability designed to trigger her protective instincts. And then by using the intimacy she'd offered in compassion before she could withdraw it. Hera married him, but Hera was not a passive partner. Hera had spent years inside her father's stomach. She had been suppressed before she could think. She had been imprisoned before she could choose. When she finally had agency, real, divine, Olympian agency, she used it, constantly. The marriage of Zeus and Hera is the defining political drama of Olympus. Him asserting dominance through force and authority, her pushing back through intelligence, manipulation, and strategic interference. They were the most powerful couple in existence. They were also, by every ancient account, genuinely miserable. But here is the moment where Zeus's control slipped. And it tells you something critical about the limits of even his system. Hades had taken Persephone, Demeter's daughter, taken while she was gathering flowers, pulled underground, made queen of the dead without consent. Demeter didn't just grieve, she stopped working. The goddess of the harvest withdrew from her role entirely. No grain grew, no crops matured, the earth went barren. Humans began to starve, animals began to die. The whole living world started collapsing. Zeus watched this for months, and then he intervened, not to punish Hades, not to demand Persephone's immediate return. He negotiated. The most powerful being in existence sat down and brokered a compromise. Persephone would spend part of the year with Hades, and part of the year above ground with her mother. The seasons were born from that deal. Winter is Demeter's grief. Spring is the reunion. But pay attention to what happened there. Zeus didn't override Hades. He didn't simply command Persephone's return and enforce it. He couldn't. Or more precisely, he chose not to try. Because Demeter had demonstrated something that even a thunderbolt can't counter, the refusal of essential labor. The goddess responsible for keeping life alive had simply stopped. And Zeus, for all his power, for all his force, needed Demeter to work. He could punish enemies, he could imprison titans, he could chain gods to mountains, but he could not grow grain himself. That negotiation is one of the most revealing moments in all of Greek mythology. It shows you the shape of his power, where it is absolute and where it is not. And Demeter knew it, which is why she used the tool she had available. Not force, withdrawal. Him asserting dominance through force and authority. Her pushing back through intelligence, manipulation, and strategic interference. They were the most powerful couple in existence. They were also, by every ancient account, genuinely miserable. But before we get to the Olympian court, there was one more war. Zeus had to fight, and this one almost finished him. After the Titans were imprisoned, Gaia was furious, not just upset, genuinely, cosmically, earth-shatteringly furious. Because those imprisoned Titans, her children, the Titans, were children of Gaia and Uranus, and Zeus had locked them in the worst place in existence. So Gaia did what she had done before when she wanted to strike at a ruling power. She raised an army, the giants, the gigantes, born from the blood of Uranus that had soaked into Gaia when Cronus castrated him. These weren't ordinary giants, these were divine warriors, born specifically to challenge Olympian power. Born with a prophecy they could only be defeated by a combined force of gods and a mortal hero. The giants attacked Olympus, and Zeus, who had just finished a 10-year war, found himself in another war, almost immediately, the Gigantomachy. And it was brutal in ways the Titanomachy wasn't. The giants hurled burning trees at the sky. They stacked mountains on top of each other to climb up to Olympus. They fought with snakes instead of legs in some traditions, serpent tails that made them terrifyingly fast and nearly impossible to restrain. The Olympians fought back with everything they had. Athena threw the entire island of Sicily onto a giant named Enceladus and buried him alive. That's why Sicily has earthquakes. Enceladus still moves beneath it. Heracles, the mortal hero required by the prophecy, fought alongside the gods because the gods could wound the giants but not kill them. Only a mortal could land the killing blow. Hermes killed one wearing the helm of invisibility. Dionysus, the god of wine, killed another with his thyrsus, his staff. Poseidon broke off a piece of a Greek island and threw it. Zeus ultimately killed the leader of the giants, Porphyrion, with a thunderbolt, and won his second war, within what would be, by human standards, a relatively short time frame after winning the first. But then Gaia escalated. She sent Typhon. And Typhon was different from anything that had come before. He was not an army. He was not a generation. He was one being. And according to the ancient sources, he was the most terrifying thing in existence. Hesiod described him as having 100 serpent heads. Each head spoke in a different voice. Sometimes like a lion, sometimes like a bull, sometimes a sound that made the earth itself shudder. He was so massive that his head brushed the stars. When he spread his arms, one hand touched the east and one the west. Fire shot from his eyes. Lava flowed when he moved, and when Typhon attacked, the Olympians fled. All of them, even Zeus. The gods transformed themselves into animals and ran to Egypt, a fact that the Greeks used to explain why Egyptian gods were depicted with animal heads. They were Olympian gods, transformed and hiding from Typhon, the most powerful gods in existence, fleeing, disguised as animals, in Egypt. Zeus eventually turned and fought. But Typhon initially won. He grabbed the sinews from Zeus's hands and feet, literally removed the tendons that allowed Zeus to move, and left him helpless in a cave. Zeus was rescued by Hermes and Pan. His sinews were returned. He recovered, and then he returned to fight Typhon. The battle was catastrophic. Mountains were used as weapons, rivers boiled, the sky cracked. Zeus ultimately buried Typhon under Mount Etna. That's why Etna erupts. Typhon still moves beneath it. Two mountains, two imprisoned divine enemies. Both still active, both still dangerous. The Greeks built geology out of mythology and mythology out of what they couldn't explain. Zeus populated Olympus with 12 key figures. Some were his siblings: Hera, Demeter, Hestia, Poseidon. Hades stayed below. Some were his children: Athena, Ares, Apollo, Artemis, Hephaestus, Hermes, Dionysus, Aphrodite completed the 12, and every single one of them served at his pleasure. Here is what mythology courses don't teach. The 12 Olympians were not chosen because they were the most powerful beings in existence. They were chosen because they were the most useful. And useful meant powerful enough to be worth having on your side, controllable enough not to threaten the throne, and functional enough to manage the domain Zeus needed managed. The ones who exceeded their usefulness, reassigned; the ones who showed independent judgment, punished; the ones who actively challenged the system, made into eternal warnings. Prometheus, a titan who switched sides before the war, who used his gift of foresight to choose correctly, who had fought with Zeus against his own generation. Zeus rewarded this initially. He gave Prometheus a role, responsibilities, proximity to the throne. Prometheus was entrusted with caring for the new creation, humans, and he took that responsibility seriously. Too seriously. The Greeks of the time had, of the ext, no fire. Not metaphorically. The early mythological humans had no access to fire technology, no warmth, no cooked food, no metalwork, no ceramics, no civilization, essentially. Prometheus looked at this situation and found it unjust. He went to Olympus. He stole fire from the hearth of the gods. He hid it in a fennel stalk. The hollow core could carry an ember, and he brought it down to humanity. Without permission, without asking Zeus, without going through proper channels, without any acknowledgement that this was Zeus's call to make. He just did it, because he thought it was right, and Zeus's response was not swift anger. It was something more calculated than that. Zeus could have simply reversed the gift. He could have taken fire back from humans. Instead, he let humans keep the fire. And he punished Prometheus in a way that had nothing to do with the fire itself and everything to do with what Prometheus's act represented. Independent action, defiance of hierarchy, the assumption that your judgment supersedes the king's. Prometheus was chained to a mountain in the Caucasus. Not any mountain, a specific one, remote, visible, memorable, and every day an eagle, sent by Zeus, flew to that mountain and ate Prometheus's liver. And every night, because Prometheus was immortal and divine, the liver grew back. So the eagle returned the next morning, every day, for thousands of years. The same eagle, the same mountain, the same consumption, the same regrowth, the same return. This was not rage, this was engineering. Zeus designed a punishment that would last indefinitely, be visible enough to become legend, be specific enough to be understood by every divine being in existence, and communicate one message with perfect clarity. If you act outside my authority, even with good intentions, you will pay a price that makes the action irrelevant. And then, thousands of years later, Zeus allowed Heracles to free. Prometheus allowed. When the political moment was right, when freeing Prometheus could serve the narrative of Zeus's mercy, when the action made Zeus look magnanimous without actually costing him anything, he didn't free Prometheus because he felt remorse. He freed Prometheus because it was useful to be seen doing so. Look at the pattern. The Cyclopes, imprisoned by his grandfather, freed by Zeus, then kept as divine craftsmen. The Hecatoncheires, imprisoned by his grandfather, freed by Zeus, then assigned as prison wardens. Metis, allied with, rewarded, then swallowed and imprisoned inside Zeus himself. Prometheus, rewarded for switching sides, punished for independent action, eventually freed when the release served Zeus's image. Every relationship Zeus built had a ceiling, every alliance had a purpose, every tool had a shelf life. And the moment anyone exceeded their designated role, Zeus responded, always, without exception. Now, here's where this story gets genuinely interesting. Because Zeus wasn't only this, he was also the god of justice. And not weakly, not as a secondary title or an honorary designation. Justice was one of his core domains. The Greeks called it xenia, sacred hospitality, the obligation to protect travelers, the duty to treat guests with honor. That was Zeus, and he enforced it with the same energy he used to punish Prometheus. King Tantalus was a mortal ruler, or partly divine, depending on the source, who had been given the extraordinary privilege of dining with the gods. He was trusted, he was honored, he had access that no ordinary human could imagine. And he decided to test whether the Olympians were truly all-knowing. He killed his own son, cooked him, served him at a divine banquet. The gods recognized what they were being served immediately. Most of them recoiled. Only Demeter, distracted by grief over her daughter Persephone, ate a small piece before realizing. Zeus was furious, not just at the act, at the violation of Xenia, of hospitality, of the sacred compact between host and guest. He had the boy reassembled, brought back from death, restored, and then he sentenced Tantalus, standing in a pool of water beneath a tree heavy with fruit. Whenever Tantalus reached for the fruit, the branches rose out of reach. Whenever he bent to drink, the water receded below his lips, eternally thirsty in a pool of water, eternally hungry, surrounded by food, every need visible, every need impossible. The English word tantalize comes directly from this punishment. When you describe something as tantalizingly close, you are unknowingly referencing a divine judgment handed down by Zeus in mythology. You use it in casual conversation. You have no idea you're quoting the king of Olympus. So Zeus was both. He swallowed his wife, he tortured his ally, he imprisoned his own father, and he rebuilt a murdered child. He punished a king who violated hospitality. He maintained order across heaven, earth, and sea for a span of time that makes all of human history look brief. Who was he really? Here's what the Greeks were actually writing. The gods in Greek mythology were not moral exemplars. They were not meant to be worshipped because they were good. They were worshipped because they were powerful, and because their stories taught something true about power itself. Power doesn't corrupt simple people. It reveals complicated ones. Cronus wasn't evil. He was afraid. He was afraid of exactly what happened. And that fear made him monstrous in his attempt to prevent it. Zeus saw this happen. He grew up as the direct consequence of that fear. He understood it completely. And yet, when his own prophecy came, and when Metis, pregnant with a son more powerful than him, represented exactly the same threat Uranus's prophecy had represented to Cronus, Zeus made the same choice. He swallowed her. The pattern didn't break with wisdom. The pattern repeated. The child of suppression became the next suppressor. And Athena, born from the skull of the god who tried to suppress her, became the goddess of wisdom. Which might be the Greeks' most sophisticated statement. That wisdom isn't inherited, that it doesn't pass smoothly from one generation to the next, that it is born always through rupture, through someone or something cracking open what tried to contain it. And there was one more, a prophecy Zeus received in his full reign. A sea nymph named Thetis, beautiful, divine, powerful, was prophesied to bear a son greater than his father. Zeus had pursued her. Poseidon had pursued her. Both of them, independently, backed away from her the moment the prophecy became clear, because neither of them was willing to risk what Uranus had risked, what Cronus had risked, a mortal hero named Peleus, and the son born from that union was Achilles, the greatest mortal warrior in Greek mythology, the man whose story anchors the Iliad. The man whose rage drives the most famous poem in Western literature. The man whose death, shot through his heel, effectively ends the heroic age. The gods deflected a divine prophecy onto humanity. They neutralized the threat to their own thrones by ensuring the prophesied greatness was born into a mortal body with a mortal vulnerability. Achilles was greater than his father. He was also mortal. He also died. The problem solved itself, and humanity absorbed the cost. That is the Olympian system in its purest form, divine power, human consequences. Even within his own children, Zeus had a hierarchy. Athena, the daughter, born from his skull, he favored, strategically brilliant, controlled, useful. She never acted without calculation. Apollo, god of prophecy, music, light, he trusted, because Apollo's domain of prophecy served the throne. Knowing the future is useful when you're trying to maintain power. But Ares was a problem. The god of war, his own son, was undisciplined, emotional, a god who loved fighting for its own sake rather than as a means to any end. During the Trojan War, Zeus watched his own son get wounded. Ares, fighting on the Trojan side, was hit by a mortal spear, aided by Athena, who guided the throw. And when Ares dragged himself to Olympus screaming in pain, Zeus looked at him with contempt. Ancient sources record Zeus telling Ares directly, "You are the most hateful of all the gods." All you love is strife and war and fighting. You have your mother's uncontrollable temper from his own father about his own son. That's the Olympian court, stripped bare. Zeus didn't love his children equally. He valued them based on utility. Athena was his favorite because she was the most strategically valuable. Ares was tolerated because war itself was necessary, but Ares the individual was considered a liability. Even divine parenthood was political. So here's what you actually just walked through. Uranus imprisoned his most powerful children because he feared them. Cronus overthrew Uranus using the imprisoned children as motivation. Then Cronus swallowed his own children to prevent the same. Zeus escaped because his mother lied to a god. Zeus freed the beings Cronus had imprisoned. Zeus won a 10-year war. Zeus consolidated power by swallowing his first ally. Zeus punished every independent action. Zeus maintained order for eternity by making every threat into a lesson. And the Greeks worshipped him, not despite all of this, because of it. Because the Greeks understood something about the structure of power that modern mythology courses try to smooth over. Power doesn't go to the most righteous. It goes to the one who understands the machine well enough to run it. Zeus understood the machine. He had watched it from a cave on Mount Ida. He had studied the man who held it. He had found every weakness, every assumption Cronus made without verifying, every prisoner Cronus had made without considering the cost. Every ally Cronus had lost through arrogance, and then he built the opposite. He verified nothing but managed everything. He converted every prisoner into an asset. He kept every ally close enough to be useful and watched closely enough to be controlled. Zeus didn't win because he was the strongest. He won because he was the most systematic. Survive the prophecy. Build the alliance from your enemy's discarded assets. Win the war by unleashing what your enemy feared. Consolidate by eliminating the next prophecy before it becomes the next war. And then maintain for eternity by making every example so visible and so memorable that no one ever tests you again. That's the real story, not gods in sandals, not heroes doing the right thing. A coup, a decade of civil war, an empire built on broken promises, strategic marriages and very visible punishments, maintained by one being who understood power more completely than anyone who had come before him. 3,000 years later, you know his name. That's the point. The follow-up to this is coming. What happened to each individual titan after the war, not just Atlas and Tartarus, every one of them. What Zeus did to the ones who had fought against him, what he did to the ones who had stayed neutral. And the one titan, just one, who walked away entirely free. Because that one exception tells you more about Zeus's judgment than anything else in this story. That's next.